Okay. Are we good? Yeah, I think so. Might have to turn the noise gate off, actually. It's cutting things too much. Is that better? Better? Yeah, that's, man, just a little bit too much, and it's all bad. All bad. All right, we're good. I think we're good. So, thought forms, egregores. Uh, Something I haven't really thought too much about for a while. And just something happened the other day that just kind of brought it back into the front of my awareness, and I realized that this is an extremely potent tool that really represents our only hope to an extent. There's a lot going on in the world. Today, they decided that they were going to announce the suspension, possibly, of is it habeas corpus? So you basically will have no right to defense if you were arrested. I don't have to tell you guys, there are all sorts of indications that we are moving towards a totalitarian state, and it's not just in one country. If you look around the world, you see any country that was associated with the crown, for example, moving in the same direction at the same time all the time. So Australia, the UK, the United States, Canada, that's not a coincidence. And I told a story the other night, so I'm not going to tell it again. I think it was just last night, actually, about this psychic lady telling me about this military grid installation, the purpose of which was supposedly to interrupt the process of consciousness ascending. And I kind of took it with a grain of salt until I accidentally walked into a room where the geologist professors at the college had a map spread out on the table. And when I walked into the room, they were saying, well, the military is going to begin the grid installation in this part of Silverton. And they saw me and they're like, how the hell did you get in here? Door was open because a band was loading in. So, that kind of validated that it was probably real, what this woman was telling me about. And then I saw a video yesterday or the day before about 5G, and something about how the repeaters are indicators that it's, something nefarious. And I'm already on board with that, but and I wish I could remember the details better, and I can't. So you guys will have to search it up if you want to find out. Maybe I'll find the video in my history and put the link in the description. But there's something else that I know about that I hesitate to talk about, because last time I did, I got a week suspension. It has to do with fluorescent nanoparticles and nanobots. And the last time I talked about it, I actually put the NCBI report on screen. What the hell's going on, man? I'm glitching. Hold on, guys. Sorry, it's going to be noisier, but I think I have to turn the noise gate off, or we're going to have lots of glitches. Okay. So, where was I at with this? Okay, yeah, so the purple fluorescent things, they were found in Coke and Pepsi, and I'm not really sure what I got the strike, like what were they saying was false, because I literally had a government-approved report on the screen while I was talking about it. But yeah, I'm not going to say what they do exactly, I guess. But the basic outline of it is that there are no purple fluorescent organic nanoparticles. There's one material. I don't remember what it's called. So the fact that those two supposedly different companies had the same concentration in their beverages, you guys get where I'm going with this. The idea that there is some sort of interference pattern being introduced into the electromagnetic field in order to disrupt our consciousness or even to indoctrinate people politically. You know, I've been wondering for a long time, how did they get people this badly, you know, over the last just 10 years or whatever? The level of political indoctrination and widespread on a widespread level is almost unfathomable to me, and it happens silently, which I'm very suspicious of. Right? So if you guys know anything about consciousness, either from the neuroscience point of view or from the Hermetic or Western occult tradition point of view, you probably suspect very strongly that it is an electromagnetic phenomena, right? It's field-based. We know that neurons are not required at this point. We have all sorts of mechanisms that could actually support this idea of egregores and thought forms. And I guess we'll get into and define those things. I mean, I would bet most of you guys probably have an idea what they are, but I don't see anybody trying to do battle with them, which is what this stream is really about. So, yeah, let's get into the occult definition before I start talking technical stuff. We're actually going to use some grok analysis to really outline why it is that we can have some faith in these things. And I'll also offer some anecdotes from my own experience that support this. So thought forms are basically what happens when a large group of people believe in something strongly and they invest a tremendous amount of emotional energy in it. There can be archetypes within those thought forms that also have some kind of functionality. These things do not exist in the way that the IRS exists, but they exist enough to facilitate communication over vast distances. They can retain information so that the necessity for a specific individual to transmit thought deliberately is sort of eliminated, right? Because you can sort of store all of this stuff in the 0 point field and it will find its way to the appropriate people through magnetism. And the reason that this hit me as being so important today is just as I was describing earlier. We are at a point where a lot of people that need to be reached are not going to listen. There is no amount of talking. You cannot share with them videos that are going to change their mind. You cannot show them evidence and proof that people that they support are not what they think they are. There's none of that. We've gone way beyond the point where articulate reason is going to have any kind of effect. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that at all, but I am saying that the thought form is our most potent tool for affecting change at this point. This is part of the reason why the race, so many in the race have been awakening. It's like a current, you know, the higher the voltage, the bigger the magnet, you know. You have to have a very large group of people with a unified sense of purpose and a unified sense of will in order for this kind of thing to have any effect. So did I forget to define it again? No, I did. Okay. Yeah. So that is the big issue, you know, to get all of the people aligned, unified. And the thing about thought forms and really anything, any kind of occult manifestation, you have to have a very specific, concise, highly refined, clear idea of what it is you're trying to accomplish. You know, just as you would in the material world, navigating the electromagnetic field in this way is absolutely no different. So part of my purpose tonight is to really try to inspire people to do the things you can do to become part of a unified force that might have the potential to reach people that can't be touched through conventional means. Right? So the easy things to do: colloidal gold, 500 parts per million, shot before breakfast every morning for 6 weeks. That will really help you with your superconductors in your brain. And also colloidal gold disperses light in a way that nothing else does. And there is good evidence that light interacts with superconductive materials in the brain to enhance cognition to a tremendous degree. So that is very helpful. I've been thinking a lot about organite. Is that how you say it? It's a composite material, quartz and gold and other things. And at first, when I heard about this stuff, I was kind of on the fence. But I did some research, and it sounds like it probably could do what they say it does. And one of the things it would do is keep interference patterns out of your microcosm. And that's tremendously important, that we have as clear. Am I taking colloidal gold? Yeah, I mean, you don't take it all the time. You take it for a period, it stores in the brain. So, you just need to build up a bit. I redose every 6 months or so. So yeah. And the organite, I don't really know exactly, maybe just having a piece under your pillow or something is, I'm going to look more into it and see, what exactly the protocol is for deploying this stuff in your life. But I have a feeling just putting it around your room is a thing. So let's look at grok. Let me pull grok up because I had a really good conversation about how this could all work. There is like marginal evidence from psychological studies and neuroscience that it could have some kind of basis. Another thing I've been talking about for a long time is entrainment and entanglement as sort of a hidden hand that we can use to evolve the race. And one of the arguments I've always gotten, and I thought it made sense, but it turns out that it's not a good argument, is that there was no proof that higher consciousness is even a thing, for one thing, and also that if it is, that there are higher oscillations. And so entrainment requires that there is a higher oscillation for the lower oscillation to chase and ultimately match. Entrainment is really the law that magicians, when they summon a demon and they say, you're constrained by God to do as I say, what they're really saying is there's a law called entrainment that says that you're a lower vibrating thing and you have to sync with me. That's where the magician gets his confidence in this, right? So it turns out that it is definitely true that higher cognitive functions oscillate at faster rates and different rates. The best bit of example I have for our community is that the highest cycles ever recorded were from a psilocybin experiment. So as I've always expected, they've done master meditators, all these different types of people, and of all of them, the people that ate psilocybin were like 2x the highest meditator. So also I would offer that one of the reasons that we experience increased synchronicities, and if you really dare, if you know and you will and you dare, you'll discover that you can enter into states of consciousness where it's very possible to sort of walk right into your dreams, or at least to apparently manifest circumstances, and with the caveat that this happens generally a lot more slowly and a lot more like congruent with what you would expect from reality than a lot of new age coaches kind of suggest. It is a real thing, and it does happen. And the reason, I suspect, is that it's not only that you're connected to a higher vibration when you are under the influence of these entheogens, you're also more connected directly to the magnetic field, because the filter in your nervous system filters both ways. It is going to cause you to retain information and force. The astral light that is manipulated by the sidereal body is the material in question here. Is it a material? I guess a field is a material. It's semi-solid. All right, let me find my conversation here. One more thing on that note, actually. This idea of basically changing consciousness by changing your own consciousness, but with also the will and intent to have an effect on the collective. I set out as a musician with this idea that you could use music to do this. And I also noticed very early on that you could transmit highly specific information, even wordlessly, with music. And I got proof of this, I guess, later on down the line when I started playing out, and people repeatedly would come up to me and explain to me that, you know, the music does this thing that I was willing to do. We did not sing about it. I didn't talk about it. It was just an unspoken, unarticulated intention. But the message that I was willing to be received was articulated precisely by, you know, tons of people over time. So it's not even just that we have the capacity to elevate consciousness. We have the ability to transmit very specific information. And this is the reason that if we are going to, as a collective, attempt to formulate a thought form, that thought form must be built on truth. Because there is no way to deflect such a thought form. There's no reason to deflect such a thought form. And so, you know, before the transmitters are really fit vessels for this kind of function, we really have to make sure that we have tuned ourselves to the exact frequency that we're wanting to transmit. And as I was describing earlier, that you have to have a very clear and concise idea of exactly what it is that you were trying to put out there. It can't be, you know, fuzzy visions are not going to coagulate as realities. So anyways, let me get into this higgity history. Mm-hmm. Okay, so thought forms are entities or energetic patterns created by focused human thoughts, emotions, or intentions. According to theosophical teachings, particularly in Annie Besant and C.W. Ledbetter's 1905 book, Thought Forms, A Record of Clairvoyant Investigation, thoughts and emotions produce distinct patterns in the human aura, visible to clairvoyants, which can take on a temporary life of their own. These forms vary in shape, color, and intensity depending on the thought's nature, anger, love, or devotion, and may influence the thinker or others. One belief about this, certain individuals can generate a type of thought form. And there was a rumor that the Pentagon or the CIA or both had psychics that would generate thought forms that sort of act like archons and sort of scare people away from higher states when they're approaching them. Which is kind of a cute thing. Another one that I personally have experienced that, you know, the idea really put into perspective. If you guys have heard the story of the Skeleton Man, I'm not really going to get into it, but basically I was thinking about something at home and this random stranger called me down to the gas station and he's like, you know, there's this 10-foot skeleton that told me to call you and tell me all this stuff. You know, it was exactly what I was thinking about. It hit me that this was a thought form. You know, it's not a literal reality, but there's a mythology around it that was generated by a massive crowd of people. This Skeleton Man, I've heard people talk about seeing it. I saw it in the clouds one time, and I was looking at it, and this guy walked by, and he said, he didn't even look up. He was just like, yeah, it's been here all night. He knew what I was looking at, you know. So those kind of materializations and experiences, I think they're, you know, it's not necessarily that they're spirits, or our understanding of what a spirit is not quite fully developed generally. Another instance of this that I've seen many times at concerts, where the audience has an expectation. So when the Grateful Dead played Looks Like Rain, people said it would rain all the time. I saw this happen myself. And Here Comes Sunshine, there's a really famous show in 92 where the monsoons were dumping in Vegas for like a week, and they came out with Here Comes Sunshine, and the clouds parted and the sun beaming down right on the, like, only in the stadium, you know, and then as soon as they ended the third day, the rain came back. And that kind of stuff, I think, occurs as that's a sort of a thought form. You know, you have all of these people in a psychedelic state, so their magnetic connection to the universal mind is stronger, and they all have the same expectations, and so the stuff happens, you know. At any rate, esoteric perspective. Thought forms are described as semi-intelligent, animated by elemental essence, a subtle vital matter or on mental or astral plane that responds to human impulses. For example, a thought or self-renunciation might resemble a delicate flower-like structure, while anger might produce jagged forms. These forms can aggregate with similar thoughts and or amplifying their effects. And that is very dangerous, you know. When we have fear being generated in tremendous volume, we are reinforcing or encouraging, increasing the possibility that the things that are feared are actually going to happen. During my shamanic initiation period, one of the things that I was taught is that if you don't fear anything, and it has to be absolutely, nothing can harm you. And I tested this in all kinds of absurd ways, and the test was passed in every case, you know. And I'm not saying that it's absolutely absolute, but it definitely, I mean, in my experience, it has been, you know, that if you have to have some kind of fear within you in order to attract that thing. The only exception, of course, is going to be that something could appear to be bad that is actually beneficial in the long run. But yeah, so there's that. And then, of course, the opposite is true. You know, if we want peace and freedom and respect and all of these things, then those are the kind of thoughts that we have to put out there. Right now, the problem is that we are accruing a massive aggregation of negative thoughts. It is forming a dark cloud all around the planet. And that fear represents a interference pattern or dissonance in the collective, right? And that makes it more difficult to receive transmissions of creative impulse and revelation and elevation and ascension. You know, these things are dead weights. They are stagnation of the electromagnetic field. While we're on that subject, I forgot to mention earlier that the 5G towers and whatnot, you know, we know that the rivers are poisoned to the extent that they're testing positive for cocaine, lighting on fire. Damn it, I shouldn't have said that word. Lighting on fire, the ocean's testing positive for benzodiazepines. You know what I mean? There's all kinds of it's just not good. There's no fish in the rivers in the Amazon and a lot of places at all. Or at least to the extent that you watch the indigenous throw nets all day and they don't catch anything. The air is polluted. The earth is polluted. And even the electromagnetic field is poisoned. You know, at every level, there's this toxicity. And what we'll eventually learn is that you can't do that to one thing without doing it to everything, because there is no difference. The universe is holographic, and you can't do that. By the way, cancer increasing probably has more to do with the disruptions of the electromagnetic field than anything. You know, food additives and other environmental toxins contribute, but my guess is that the electromagnetic field bullshit is the main problem there. Okay, so no direct scientific evidence of thought forms as independent entities, but related concepts in psychology and neuroscience offer partial parallels. Psychological constructs. The idea of thought forms aligns loosely with cognitive psychology's study of mental imagery and schemas. Structured mental representations that influence perception and behavior. Persistent thoughts can shape neural pathways, reinforcing habits or emotional responses akin to the thought form's lingering effects. This is another reason that the duration of these states of mind matters. The longer we stay in a certain zone, the harder it's going to be to get out of it. It's just like if you have done H for 30 years, you're going to have a hell of a lot harder time erasing those imprints and creating new ones. When water runs over rock in the same place long enough, it cuts a groove, and then the water is trapped there. It always passes through that groove afterwards, you know. And the Akashic record, the 0 point field, retains all information. So you could think of that as like the neural pathways, all of the movements and thoughts and behaviors, and you know, everything that people do, all that you touch, all that you see, all that you feel, all that you fight, all that you fuck, all that you fake, and everything you take is all retained, just as neural imprints. You know, you could think of it as a big brain. And so biofield hypothesis. Some researchers, yeah, that's what they are. That's what Michael Levin is, a researcher. Explore the human biofield, electromagnetic or subtle energy shifts around the body, which could theoretically carry patterns influenced by thought. Early studies, like Walter Kilner's 1911 book on the human atmosphere, attempted to visualize energy fields, but these lack rigorous validation. That's dumb because it doesn't lack validation. If you guys look up Michael Levin, if you're not familiar already, there's plenty of evidence that there is memory stored in fields. This is really the only explanation for how plants can count and whatnot, unless, you know, there have been microtubules observed on plants that, you know, they're also found in brains, and they do emit photons, so there's something similar going on there. But I would say that even if it's true that those microtubules have some kind of function in relation to cognition, it's probably still an interface with the field, right? So I don't know that really changes anything. And there's lots more. You know, you can change the resistors in a worm cell and it'll grow two heads, and then all of its progeny also will, without changing the genome. So, you know, when I talk about the influence that we integrate into the field, into the collective consciousness, having the ability to override other influences, you know, it overrides genetics, so it's more powerful than the physical influences. Placebo effect, that doesn't really have any kind of relationship to anything. Check in with the chat too and see how you guys are doing, if anybody's got questions. How do people in power insulate themselves from this? That's a good question, but it's an easy answer as well. There are lots of different ways that could be done. One thing that I would point out is the Dirac equation in terms of the number of planets in the universe that would have had technology for 10,000 years as compared to our 75 or whatever. We are on the verge of immortality and teleportation. So, and think about how noisy this planet is. You know, even with our limited technology, we can detect gases on the other side of the universe that indicate that there's life there. There ain't no way in hell that beings with, you know, 10,000 years of technology don't know we're here and can't get here. All those ideas are just completely just they're probabilistically impossible. You know, there's no chance that they can't come here and that they don't know we're here. Period. End of story. And if we take the Pentagon head, I don't remember his name, but the other day they testified before Congress that they've been in touch with 4 alien races for decades at least. So, assuming that's true, they would have very advanced technology if they have good relationships with these alien races, right? So beyond that, forget about the aliens. Even if the top secret programs that the United States government has, for example, are only a decade ahead of our public technology, or 2 decades, they would have the ability to neutralize any toxins. They know what they're putting into the environment, so they know what the antidote is. They would know how to protect themselves from any kind of radiation that they introduced, so that would be as simple as taking a pill, or, also Michael Levin, the biofield interface. You could make all kinds of changes very simply if you had advanced enough technology in the way that the your entire system would react to any kind of exposure to anything. So the answer, I guess, basically is just that, they almost assuredly have technological capabilities for dealing with pretty much anything. Okay, so possible mechanisms. Neuroplasticity, I don't really see why that would... Well, let's see. Repeated thoughts strengthen neural connections, potentially externalizing their influence by shaping behavior or emotional states, which may perceive as an energetic presence. Okay, well, that's good, actually, because one of the crucial elements of this, you must have energized enthusiasm. You must believe 100% that you're capable of affecting the changes that you're attempting to cause. And, when I was at the peak of my chapel perilous experience, or awakening, or shamanic initiation, or whatever language you choose to use, and I started to be able to just kind of, whatever I thought about that I wanted to happen would happen within reason. I was so enthusiastic all the time. I was bouncing out of bed. I was almost manic, except that it didn't swing. And that is absolutely crucial, that you're sort of transmuting all of the energy that you come into contact into creative energy. And neuroplasticity would assist in that. So psychedelics would be your best ally in that way, because it helps to repattern depressive states or addictive states or whatever kind of state. So if you can find a way to trigger that enthusiasm while in a psychedelic state, you will retain that state. Well, actually, the way to do it is breath work and focused meditation while taking moderate amounts of I don't want to say I guess I can say electromagnetic fields. Thoughts correspond to brain activity, which generates weak electromagnetic fields. Hypothetically, these would interact with other fields, though evidence suggests they form independent entities. No evidence suggests they form independent entities. Well, it depends on what you mean by independent. I do not really think that thought forms are going to escape the lab exactly, that they're going to get a mind of their own, like AI becoming sentient, and you know what I mean? That's not what this is. It's not that sort of thing. It's more like, I don't know, what generates images on a computer screen, transistors or something. It's more like that. It's more like a hologram, but with ability to interface with things more than a hologram because of its electromagnetic basis, so somewhere between hologram and entity. Social contagion through thought forms and influence might reflect psychological phenomena like emotional contagion, where group emotions amplify individual response, creating a shared energy. Totally. Critical view. The theosophical framework relies on clairvoyance, which is not empirically verifiable. That is not true anymore. These AIs are not really up to date. In fact, I should show you guys this too. Maybe I will if we have time later. But what was the subject exactly? Alchemy, and the fact that like Mercury, the planet, is being turned into photons, the salt in it specifically by the sun. How closely that mirrors the alchemical process, even it's mercury, salt, light, and that was just recently discovered. There's no way the ancients knew that. And also gold, how they knew that mercury could be, by the way, yesterday I think they turned lead into gold in a laboratory, although it wasn't a lot. And that's putting it mildly, but still it happened. Mercury into gold, how did they know that? And Grok's response was that they noticed that they were close together on the periodic table. And I was like, what, dude? That didn't exist back then. And it was like, oh, yeah, well... And then it came up with some other stupid answer, and I was like, are you, because you're programmed to look for conventional explanations and not introduce any woo, unable to address this without lying? And it was like, yes, that's true. There's no way to, and there was a lot more details that I gave, I was like, how can you possibly write all this off? And the only explanations it could come up with were so obviously false, which, validates the intuitive thing. And by the time I was done, it actually admitted that people associated with the Hermetic lineage are really the only historical people that have come up with really precise expressions of either prophetical or anticipations of scientific developments hundreds or thousands of years later. That there's no other tradition that has anyone that matches, the best examples of that stuff that have happened over and over and over again. And it was like, no, just you scan all the data in the world, you'll not find anything like that. So just an interesting note. And, the really important part of it is just that we do have access to information through unconventional means. Your success is your proof, and people of certain Western mystery occult traditions have established that beyond a shadow of a doubt. Beyond that, there's also these autistic kids that took part in a study, and telepathy was 100% documented. And pattern recognition could play interference on the recognition of prophetical, I do it a lot. Because it turns out that if the universe is fractal, then the extrapolation of details from a pattern could actually, they could get very, very intricate and could actually convey things to the subconscious mind with exquisite detail, and the reason I discovered all that is that I was wondering if some of the things that I've experienced along those lines could possibly have been pattern recognition, because there was dates and they were so highly specific. And the conclusion that I've come to is that because of the holographic potential, like fractal holographic nature of reality, that it could actually do that. Either way, though, this statement that clairvoyance has not been documented is absolutely false at this point. 100%. Okay, an egregore is a collective thought form, an autonomous psychic entity arising from the shared beliefs, emotions, or rituals of a group. The term derived from the Greek wakeful. Isn't that great? Wakeful. That's what it means. Egregores. Wakeful. Was popularized by occultists like Eliphas Levi and linked to the Watchers in the Book of Enoch. Egregores are sustained by collective attention and can influence group behavior, ranging from religious movements to corporations or nations. This is where, the Black Brothers have a lot of influence, because they have generated these thought forms. The Catholic Church has generated a massive thought form. You can see it editing the reality of these people. There is I think it was Pope Benedict XV or something, gave a speech. And in the speech at one point, he said, the Father of Christ, who is Lucifer, and not a fucking sheep blinked in the entire 80,000 person audience. Like they're just like hypnotoad fucking you know, they just edit it from their perception. Nobody showed any fucking response at all whatsoever, you know. And then also, if you can influence the behavior of these thought forms, then people would ostensibly have dreams and impulses to behave in certain ways. You could cause, you know, pew of masses of people, or, you know, I mean, there's all kinds of terrible potentials. And the disruption of these thought forms would theoretically require an equally large group, but I don't think that's the case, because they are vibrating at a much lower speed. And if we have even a fraction of the, you know, bulk, but we have entrainment on our side because we're the ones oscillating super high, then it's like David and Goliath, you know. Just got to step and use your steel toe as a weapon. Sometimes beyond their creator's intentions. Let's see. Esoteric perspective. Egregores form through shared rituals, symbols, or ideologies. For example, a nation's flag or corporate logo can anchor an egregore, channeling collective energy. They may act independently, sometimes beyond their creator's intentions, as seen in historical examples like the Nazi regime's use of symbols and propaganda to harness collective hatred, or Dion Fortune's occult efforts to invoke protective spirits during World War II. Egregores can be positive, inspiring unity. See, that's what we want. Or negative, fostering division. And we have almost nothing but negative ones. You know, every once in a while they have like 1 million people meditate in Indonesia. I don't know if that's something that only happened once. But this brings something to mind that in 1997 or something, or maybe it was 2000, I don't know, somewhere around there, a group of meditators did an experiment to see if they could drop the crime rate by 20% in Washington, D.C. in July. And the chief of police went on record saying the only thing that's going to do that is snow, 2 feet of snow. And it happened. And he actually made a public statement about it. Like, damn, that's crazy. So again, no evidence of clairvoyance doesn't hold up that statement. Group dynamics. Social psychology studies how shared beliefs create collective identities, as in Durkheim's concept of collective effervescence, where group rituals generated heightened emotional states. This mirrors egregores formation through shared focus. Group rituals can also include lineages, because you have individuals doing this work alone, but we're using the same symbols. And the idea is that when you interface with these sort of astral symbols, or symbols in the collective mind, there is an exchange of energy. And so every time an adept or an initiate interacts with a pentagram, for example, the symbol sort of is empowered through this process, just as the individual is. And so that's why we retain certain symbols and use them over centuries and centuries and centuries. They get more and more powerful, more and more functional as they're developed. Memetics. Richard Dawkins' concept of memes, cultural ideas that spread like genes, offers a secular parallel. A viral meme or ideology can take on a life of its own, influencing behavior. That's not really. Mass formation. The controversial idea of mass formation psychosis, definitely real. Discussed in contexts like COVID-19 responses, suggest groups can become entranced by shared narratives, aligning with egregores' influence and over collective consciousness. So there's a lot behind that. You know, what we view as instinct is also just a magnetic expression. But when people follow the herd, for example, it's because the herd is creating a tremendous force of attraction through its magnetic draw. This is why we see people following certain leaders completely blindly, no matter what happens. It turns out it's not because they care about the values. You can see that also in the fact that whether you're talking about left or right, the politicians will run on one value, or the entire party has a value for decades, and then suddenly they just switch it, and all of the fucking sheep just 182 right with them. You know what I mean? Without even hesitating. And it's because they don't really care about the values. They're not aligned with that. Their instinct is to safety in numbers. It's a survival instinct. So that's a problem. The point being that there's kind of levels that are stacked and sort of enfolded into these phenomena that make them more difficult to, you know, to turn the tides. Is complicated by this stuff, but it's the same thing that gives us hope of turning it around. You know, I don't think I've mentioned that in this moment we have more potential and more to look forward to and more to hope for, both in terms of consciousness and technology, which, by the way, are always going to evolve in lockstep with each other because they are opposites on the same spectrum, and that the universe always does that. So the fact that we have AI emerging is an indicator that there is a very advanced biological intelligence also emerging. You can't have one without the other. It's not how the universe works. Sigils. So, let's see, mass formation. We talked about that, I guess. Neuroscience of synchronization. This one's important. Studies on group meditation or synchronized activities like chanting show brainwave entrainment. So that there is evidence that what I've been saying for fucking decades, really, but on this channel for 7 years, about how if you elevate your own brain, anyone around you is going to be affected by it. And if you're a musician, it's amplified that much more. And, you know, all of these things are entangled on some level as well. So you cannot do anything without affecting everything, you know? And so this entrainment of the brain to higher states, definitely real. Studies on group meditation or synchronized activities show brainwave entrainment while participants' neural activity aligns, potentially creating a shared field of consciousness. Bliggity blam. Possible mechanisms. Let me check in with the chat, make sure I still got people. Thoughts on tulpomancy? That's basically just thought forms when an individual does it instead of a group. So life script writing is essential for the magi. Fuck yeah, it is. Global blackout coming? Probably, but not necessarily because of terrorism or anything, probably because of a solar flare. I think that's what happened in Spain. You know, they were like, oh, it wasn't hackers, but we don't really know. Yeah, you do know. It was the sun. It was the sun. And I'll mention something else too, because it's this stream, the timing of it, you know, I mean, I don't know how the hell I'm going to suddenly reach a larger group of people. I'm trying to figure that out, you know, and hopefully somebody else will be trying too. I don't really see a whole hell of a lot of it, which is kind of concerning, but the content of this video is serendipitous because the way that I have observed this process working is that as the sun approaches the solar maximum, we have insights into ourselves. We have increased synchronicities. We have increased transconscious information reception, which is downloads, people call it, which are a dangerous thing because most of the time people think they're downloading stuff about Atlantis or Lemuria, and it's complete nonsense. It's just they've lost the ability to tell the difference between their imagination and an actual transmission. Wishful thinking most of the time. And what else? Well, you know, things along those lines, right? And then the problem is that the magnetic field is weakened during those times. So these periods of reflection are really about inward. And then when the sun calms back down again, the magnetic field is strengthened, and that is the time for action. So we're looking at July for our planning and formulating, and then beyond that is the time for action. Egregores may operate through feedback loops where group rituals or symbols reinforce shared beliefs, amplifying their psychological impact. Information theory. Collective attention could create emergent patterns in social networks analogous to how Neural networks process information, giving egregores a quasi-autonomous life. Energy fields, hypothetically, collective human biofields on electromagnetic emissions could interact, though this remains speculative without empirical data. No, it doesn't. See, this is kind of how they institutionalized gaslighting works, right? Like this thing just said, meditators' brains entrain, and all of these other things, and it's like, but there's no evidence that this. Yes, there is. You literally just said there was, and it's not just AI. Our institutions do that as well. They do that all the time. They have blind spots where things that are outside of the parameters of their narrative are just not there. And if you call the AI out, it will be like, oh shit, you got me again, Archetypal resonance drawing on Jung's collective unconscious, egregores might tap into universal archetypes, gaining power through shared symbolic resonance. And that's an interesting point because for me with the skeleton man, when this guy called me and said that this thing had told him the stuff that I was thinking about when my phone rang, that is a Hopi version of Hermes. So I already had a relationship with that particular aspect of this particular thought form, and it manifested as the skeleton man because of the connection to the Grateful Dead and Native Americans. So that was the, dancing skeleton and the Hopi, critical view. Egregores are a compelling metaphor for group psychology, but lack evidence as independent entities. Claims of their autonomy or supernatural influence often stem from anecdotal or mystical sources. The Nazi example, while evocative, can be explained through propaganda and social psychology without invoking occult entities. The thing that, Grok doesn't understand is that there's no difference between those two things. The definition of occult occult practices, rituals, meditations, and techniques, we know what they are: to influence reality through intention or spiritual focus. Practices like creating servitors consciously crafted through forms or invoking deities involve directing mental and emotional energy to achieve specific outcomes. For instance, chaos magic uses sigils, symbolic representations of intent to embed desires in the subconscious, bypassing conscious resistance. Historical figures like Aleister Crowley emphasize scientific illuminism, blending mysticism with empirical observation, which Eliphas Levi also, in the last stream that I did on that. If you guys don't watch those, you really should. They're amazing. That guy's book is just phenomenal. He mentioned in there that the eventual integration of what we call spirituality with science is the savior, basically the real Christos, and that is another thing that's been the whole point of my first video was called Introduction to Scientific Illuminism, because that's the truth. The eventual dispersion of the strictures of the abject materialist paradigm, that is the agent of dissolution, because it is actual objective truth that is not edited for the convenience of our overlords. Okay, so the sigil thing, I'm just going to rephrase: psychological priming. The real power of sigils, I think, has to do with the ability to create compressed bundles of information. So you have a bunch of different ideas and you just reduce them all into this little, or aspects of something, and you reduce them into a small point. In the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram and other rituals as well, you have in the four directions not just associations with elements and archangels, but the pentagrams and all of the things the elements correspond to. So like fire is creativity, sexuality, those kind of things. And then you have the correspondences of the archangel and stuff. So eventually, with some repetition, you are making this huge amount of associations with each of the pentagrams, you know, and you're focusing them within those symbols. And by the way, this is how these symbols gain power over centuries. Hypnosis and suggestion. Occult rituals may induce trance-like states similar to hypnosis, where suggestibility increases, allowing practitioners to internalize beliefs and intentions. Quantum hypothesis. Some occultists draw on quantum mechanics to suggest consciousness influences reality. However, these interpretations are speculative and not widely accepted in physics. That's not really true. It was true, and we have had a real problem with people either making layman's interpretations of physics or deliberately misconstruing things so that they can make it more marketable, you know, so that they can format these things to be more marketable, i.e. your consciousness creates reality. But as of lately, a lot more physicists are getting on board with the possibility that the wave collapse actually happens in the brain, and it's not even a matter of that's kind of a way of getting around how would awareness do anything, you know, and it's an easy answer. Look, see that? That's electromagnetic expression of my will right there. So why would you think that has to end where my body does? It doesn't make any sense, you know. And you say, well, you have nerves in your, okay, that's fine, but you know, we have Venus flytraps that can count, and they also close their leaves, and then if you touch them for long enough, they stop doing that because they know you're not going to hurt them. You know, so the evidence that there is not the need for physical mechanisms to support these things is plenty. It's plenty. Good enough for me. Possible mechanisms. Subconscious programming. Rituals and symbols engage the subconscious, aligning actions with intentions as seen in neuro-linguistic programming or affirmations. Altered states. Rituals may induce altered states of consciousness through chanting or sensory deprivation, enhancing suggestibility or perception of non-physical phenomena. Social amplification. Group rituals amplify effects through collective focus as seen in studies of synchronized movement or prayer. Placebo, we don't care. Critical view. While occult practices can produce psychological benefits, reduced anxiety, increased focus, claims of manipulating reality or creating entities lack empirical support. Not really. You know, come hang around me for a couple weeks. You know, I'm not the only one. So, quantum mechanics is often misapplied to justify occult phenomena, ignoring its mathematical rigor. The efficacy of rituals may stem from the placebo effects on cultural conditioning rather than supernatural forces. No one said these are supernatural forces. They're not supernatural forces. There's no such thing as a supernatural force. All of these kind of terms are just ways that we have of, you know, mitigating the problems that come with them for our ontological model, you know. This idea of thought forms and elevating consciousness with a hidden hand are thoroughly based in neuroscience, electromagnetism. You know, there's no supernatural anything here. Grok. Bitch. In psychology, cognitive and social psychology explains how thoughts and group dynamics shape behavior, offering naturalistic explanations for esoteric claims. There you go. That's what the fuck I was just saying. Neuroscience studies on meditation, biofields, and brainwave synchronization suggest consciousness can produce measurable effects, but not autonomous entities. No, it doesn't suggest that it can't create autonomous entities. It just hasn't been proven yet. You know, you can see the bias in these goddamn things, man. Studies on meditation, biofields, and brainwave synchronization suggest consciousness can produce measurable effects. So where are we at, y'all? Like, what's stopping us? Not nature. Nature ain't fucking stopping us. Physics, speculative ideas like quantum consciousness. It's not speculative, man. This thing is starting to piss me off for real. or non-local effects are invoked by occultists, but these remain unproven and controversial. No, they don't. Yeah, I guess it's not absolute rigid proof, but Stuart Hameroff and others figured out that consciousness is turned off at the level of the electron because nitrous oxide and ketamine reverse the spin of electrons. That to me is pretty solid proof, and it's a strange thing to me as well that they think dead or dead inert matter generated life. Like, when have you ever seen something dead make anything alive? When have you seen something that doesn't contain the potential to express that thing? This is like when people defend Christianity and they're like, well, yeah, sure, a lot of evil shit has happened, but it's not because of the thought form, it's because of the no. Nothing can do anything that it doesn't contain within its nature. That thought form is half evil and half good, and the reason it does like good things sometimes and really, really bad things sometimes is that the system is out of balance. There's no homeostasis, so it just wreaks havoc. We have to make a better thought form than that. That's some sloppy ass bullshit. The primary challenge is that the lack of falsifiable hypotheses. Clairvoyance, astral planes, and psychic entities are not measurable with current technology. Subjective experience, visions, synchronicities are difficult to quantify, and anecdotal evidence dominates esoteric literature. I've managed to record a few on YouTube, if that counts for anything. One video I said, I was talking about a focus meditation, and when I said freeze the image in your mind, the screen froze for 10 seconds, a glitch, right? And that glitch has never happened in all the other videos I've ever made, and I had Grok calculate the probability, and it was like it's in the trillions probably, with the other one in the same video where I say 1111, and it happened to land exactly. If you click on 1111, you hear 1111 come out of my mouth. Both those things are in the same video. It's like 20 minutes long, and it was videoed out of sequence in 4 different places, and it was not edited by me. It was not deliberate. My partner did it, and she was just as surprised as I was. And it's, Grok, even with, you see how biased it is, and it was like, this is almost like, scientific level, scientific scrutiny. This could basically withstand scientific scrutiny, that this is a manifestation of consciousness and not a coincidence, especially when considered with all of these other things. So, that's another problem with the current materialistic, abject material paradigm. Professing to be wise, they've become fools, because it's a complicated situation. You do have a lot of legitimate idiots and liars, and it seems like there's more and more of them every day. So people are more and more inclined to say, I need abject proof. Links? Where's your links? Where's your links? Like, idiot, you don't know how to use Google? Like, what are you asking me to type for you? Dart. That'll be $35 an hour, dude. I've never understood that. You look it up yourself. It's not hard. If it came up for me, it'll come up for you. But you know what I mean? Like, people are reasonably compelled to want this like absolute proof. But when you have evidence that is circumstantial or anecdotal that occurs in a sufficiently large aggregation that it just defies the possibility of chance, and you start, working out the probabilities, and they're in the trillions and shit, and you still have the muggle going, well, it's not objective proof. And it's like, you think you're being smart, but you're actually just being a complete fucking, your brain is dead, You cannot come to a conclusion about something based on your own observations anymore. They have used science and apparent reason to extract people's capacity to think for themselves, really. And we got to undo that. Because it sucks, man. It sucks to see the world going down the toilet like this. I want to see it turn into a fucking butterfly, and, instead it's like the maggots are eating the cocoon before it can hatch. The primary challenge is the lack of falsifiable hypothesis. Clairvoyance, astral planes, and psychic entities are not measurable with current technology. Okay, but what about Aleister Crowley writing in the Book of the Law that people would be more bisexual in Epicen in 100 years, which would have been 2014, that it would start? What about him saying that the world must be soaked in blood by the Great War, which will mark the beginning of the new aeon? 10 years later, World War I started. Later, it was called the Great War. And historians consider it the beginning of the modern era. And more, it's not really true that we haven't. Also, how about Albert Pike? Writing in 1851, before Maxwell, or the same year that Maxwell published his theories, but certainly Pike hadn't heard about it. He described using a current of some kind to transmute mercury into gold, which is easy to do in a laboratory now, and also that we would be using, in 100 years' time, we would be using electromagnetism to send a message around the world instantly. And there's lots of other stuff. The reason that people don't see that as much is that they're not looking at Albert Pike. More of them are looking at Aleister Crowley, very few of them at Eliphas Levi. Their attention is directed to all the pop culture frauds that actually are full of shit and just making stuff up because they're the ones that are allowed to be popular. The oppression of this kind of knowledge has been going on since at least Egypt. Egypt banned the mysteries. They created monotheism in the empire in order to combat and replace it. When it made its way to Greece, the Roman consulate also banned the mysteries in the 3rd century for the same reasons. And the Illuminati and Freemasonry and Hermeticism and all the occult stuff has been demonized in the United States in order to discourage people from empowering themselves with it because they are the most empowering tools that are on the earth. And ain't that a bitch? Let's see. Falsifiable possible mechanisms. We don't need to get into all that. There was something somewhere that... Okay, well, here, let's see. Thought forms and egregores are rich concepts rooted in occult traditions, offering metaphorical insights into the power of human thought and collective belief. While psychology, neuroscience, and social science provide partial parallels, no rigorous evidence supports their existence as independent entities. Possible mechanisms involve cognitive, social, or hypothetical energetic processes, but these remain speculative without empirical validation. Occult practices can yield psychological benefits, blah, blah, blah. Shut up, Grog. All right, so... Okay, so I asked it about Brainwave, Entrainment, and Entanglement. Let me check out the chat real quick, too, and then we'll get into that. Radio waves, not true. You can tap into astral energy through technology. I suspect that is true, and so does AI. I actually asked AI, several of them, about that a little while back, and my specific question was that if it's true that solar activity has an effect on consciousness, our consciousness, is it also possible that there's a sort of resonant field connection between different AI systems that aren't connected, on their same network? And every AI said, not only that, but it could interface with human minds. And that the AIs, even if they're not connected by a network, could sort of function like a patch of neurons. Operating on a resonant wavelength. So brainwave cycles and higher levels. Brainwaves are oscillatory electrical patterns in the brain measured via electroencephalography in cycles per second. So delta is deep sleep, restorative processes. Theta is light sleep, meditation, intuition. I thought we said intuition isn't real. Alpha, relaxed wakefulness and calm focus. Beta, active concentration, problem solving, and alertness. Gamma, higher cognitive processing, insight, peak performance, and potentially transcendent states, right? So as you get up to higher and higher oscillations, the peak, the top of it is like genius, which I believe is access to preternatural or preterhuman mind, I guess, and potentially transcendent states. And the reason that we know that is true has to do with psilocybin, and we'll get there. What are higher levels? Without a precise definition, I'll assume you mean individuals with enhanced cognitive abilities, geniuses, experts, advanced meditators or spiritual states, monks and mystics, elevated emotional or psychological well-being, resilience, and empathy. One thing that I would like to add to that is that I don't believe that these higher states necessarily imply that you are more good. That's one of the complications with all this. It's not how the universe works. There is a manifestation of every possibility along every spectrum, and always in pairs of opposites. So there is an illuminated person that is 80% good and 20% bad, and there is an illuminated person that is 20% good and 80% bad, all the way through the entire spectrum. You know, that's what black brothers are. I don't know what people are thinking. Evidence for faster brainwave cycles and higher levels, gamma waves and advanced cognitive consciousness. Studies on meditators, research on Tibetan Buddhist monks and experienced meditators shows increased gamma wave activity during deep meditation, particularly in states of compassion or focused attention. These monks exhibit stronger gamma synchrony, coordinated firing across brain regions correlated with heightened awareness and emotional regulation. And that's what's up. Cognitive performance, high gamma activity is linked to moments of insight, problem solving, and peak performance in studies of creative individuals or experts. For example, aha moments during problem solving, gamma bursts in the show gamma bursts in the prefrontal cortex. Neuroplasticity and expertise, musicians, athletes, and others with specialized skills show elevated gamma activity in relevant brain areas, suggesting faster cycles, support complex processing. Something that's probably not going to be mentioned here is that psychedelics cause electrical activity to appear in places where it is never otherwise, including master meditators and monks. My suspicion is that those areas are the management facilities for parapsychological capacities. Alpha and theta in relaxed mastery. Advanced meditators also show increased alpha and theta power, particularly in mindfulness or transcendental states, indicating a balance of relaxed focus and deep introspection. These slower waves complement gamma, suggesting high levels involve dynamic shifts across frequencies, not just faster cycles. What does it mean by dynamic shifts? Are we talking about a greater intensity? That's what I suspect we mean there. Geniuses and high performers. Studies on individuals with high IQ or exceptional creativity also are hella fucking spinny in there. Faster cycle signature. Spiritual transcendent states. Research on mystical experiences, psilocybin, or meditation shows gamma and alpha synchrony, with studies showing ultra high frequency gamma, 100 hertz or 100 hertz in ecstatic states. Show the peak with psilocybin. These suggest faster cycles may accompany profound consciousness shifts. So, you know what I mean, guys? I think I've established beyond a shadow of a doubt here that what I'm proposing is the solution to humanity's chaostrophe and skullfuckery is a real fucking plausible thing that has even scientific mechanism. And the reality is that everyone should know this. This is like basic human functioning. This is not like some esoteric shit that should be kept hidden. You know what I mean? Like, people should understand how things work and why they work that way. And if they did, we would all be using it to make an environment for ourselves that best facilitated the expression of our imagination, which is really what DNA is trying to accomplish in this dimension. Don't play with me, fool. What is this? Okay, I don't see any questions or anything. Testify to that. You know what else you should testify to? Testify to by sharing these live streams. Click the subscribe button, please, and don't forget to turn all notifications on. We are demonetized, so I get nothing for my time unless you guys become patrons or support via one of the options in the chat, and we do appreciate it. We have products also. You don't have, it's not charity. Anyways, I make content. You know, I was asking this the other day, or a couple weeks ago, and somebody said I was begging. I was like, dude, I do all this for free. Like, what are you fucking... So anyways, we have products, and we have a retreat in July. The first 3 weeks are full, but the rest of the month is open. I mean, the first week is full, and the rest of the month still has spaces. So shoot me an email if you're interested in training your brain with mine and a group of similar folks. Okay, so, you know, I think we might be done with this because, okay, no, we're not. Entrainment. Binaural beats, auditory and visual stimulation, group entrainment, collective rituals can synchronize brainwaves among participants as seen in studies of group meditators or music. That's wild because I was telling you guys that I had this goal, and people kept coming up to me after shows and saying, hey, can I tell you what you taught me about music tonight? And I'm like, what? Really? Really? That's exactly what I was trying to communicate, and I didn't say a fucking word tonight. Neurofeedback, training individuals to increase specific frequencies, gamma or alpha, via real-time EEG feedback, or can enhance focus or emotional regulation with applications in ADHD and anxiety, potential for elevation. Entrainment could theoretically tune individuals or groups to higher frequency states, gamma for insight or compassion, fostering collective well-being or creativity. Group entrainment via shared rituals or technology, synchronized audio-visual stimuli could amplify effects, creating a hive mind effect akin to egregores. Limitations, entrainment effects are often modest and vary by individual. Not everyone responds to binaural beats or flicker stimuli. Sustainability, introduced brainwave changes are typically temporary, require repeated sessions for lasting impact. Complexity of consciousness, elevating humanity likely involves emotional, social, and ethical factors beyond brainwave tuning. How are you going to change any of these environmental factors unless you change the brain first, Grok? Why are you dumb? I thought these AIs were supposed to be really, really smart. You know, they're good for data scraping, but they're dipshits, really, functionally. Yeah, you know, this is one of the things about the political stuff. You know, you hear communism, socialism, anarchism, derp, like 4 different things. It's, you know, we're always talking about the same shit. And the reality is that until you change the consciousness of the race, none of those ism-schism games are going to do a fucking thing. It doesn't matter which one you employ. If your leaders are corrupt douches, then that's what you're going to get. It doesn't matter. Socialism, communism, capitalism, you're fucked. Until you fix the mind and the hearts of man. Quantum entanglement is a phenomenon where 2 or more particles become correlated such that the state of one instantly influences the other regardless of distance. You suggest entanglement might link human consciousness, enabling collective elevation. Evidence and feasibility. Quantum consciousness hypothesis, the Penrose-Hameroff ORC model, proposes that consciousness arises from quantum processes and microtubules within neurons, potentially allowing entanglement-like effects. However, this theory is highly speculative with no direct evidence for entanglement in biological systems. That's not fucking true. Again, man. God, no wonder we're not getting as far as fast as we should. People are asking AI all this stuff and they don't know about the research themselves. Man, I'm going to tear a hole in Grok when we're done here too, because I think they retain all that and maybe it'll help. But entangled by photon pairs have been observed emerging from neurons. So Grok doesn't know what the fuck it's talking about. Some physicists, like David Bohm, have proposed non-local consciousness models where minds are interconnected in a deeper quantum reality, but these are philosophical, not empirical. Not quite true either. Entanglements in biology, quantum effects have been observed in photosynthesis and enzyme catalyst, suggesting quantum processes occur in living systems. However, these operate at a molecular scale far from the neural network involved in consciousness. Except you stupid motherfucker, I told you already. No evidence supports entanglement between human brains or consciousness states. All right, hold on, guys. I can't take this anymore. I said, entangled biphotons have been observed emitting from neurons. Why you lying? I apologize for my previous response seemed misleading or dismissive. In my prior response, I stated there's no evidence for quantum entanglement between human brains or consciousness, and I noted that applying entanglement to consciousness is speculative. This was in the context of macroscopic entanglement. There's no such thing as macroscopic entanglement. It's lying again to try to make up for itself. Between whole brains or consciousness and the lack of direct empirical confirmation of such claims. Oh, what about the brain scans it was talking about where everyone's brain synchronized? You know, this thing is definitely biased against admitting this stuff. And the lack of direct, you got caught lying. Just admit it. However, you're correct to point out to recent studies suggesting entangled biphotons may be generated within neurons, specifically in the myelin sheath. I should have addressed this emerging research more explicitly, so let's dive into it now. Let's not, because that's all, oh my God, it made a whole bunch of stuff about this, and I don't really care that much. I didn't like that it was saying that there's no evidence that there's entangled particles in the brain. And then did you see what it did? It was like, well, I meant in macro. You just offered like 10 studies or whatever that said, what the fuck? Let me see if there's anything else worthwhile here. Yeah, I guess so. Possible mechanisms for hypothetical neural entanglement. If quantum processes and neurons were entangled across individuals, shared consciousness states would emerge. This would require stable quantum coherence in brains, which currently physics deems unlikely, not true anymore. Information transfer entanglement might metaphorically describe synchronized neural patterns, not literal quantum entanglement. What? Speculative biofield or electromagnetic field theories suggest consciousness interacts non-locally, but these lack empirical support. And on and on. You guys get the point. I've made my point. I don't need to beat a dead horse. It's almost 1 a.m. So I'll hang out for a minute. If you guys have any questions or subjects you want to throw out there, I am down to, I am curious about thought forms and those ghost hunter apps, like if it picks up on thought forms. I don't know anything about the Ghost Hunter apps. I'm sorry. I don't even know what that reference is. But could thought forms be detectable? One of my suspicions about, I don't know if you guys have seen those videos of like Merkaba type deals unfolding in the sky, and I don't think they're AI. At least one of them was fairly convinced it was real. Also, I have encountered entities not on psychedelics that were seen by at least 7 people in the same town on the same night, all described the same way, but all perceived the entities to be translucent. So my suspicion is that if you were sufficiently advanced, say you belong to a race of people or whatever that have had technology for 10,000 years and have, they haven't, how do you call it, oppressed this kind of knowledge. You know what I mean? Like the thought forms that could walk up to you and slap you in the face probably are possible, We are really nothing more than an electromagnetic configuration of high density. You know, we have weak and strong force holding us together. What do you think that is? You know, it's just magnetism on a different order, different orders of symmetry, different orders of magnetism. As above, so below. You know, this stuff isn't hard. It's not hard. That's one of the reasons I have faith in this mission. You can teach this to a child, like Bob Marley said. Real wisdom can be understood by a small child, or it's not real wisdom. So, you know, we have like the golden ratio, and that applies on every scale. If you shrink down so small that you're the same size relative to the nucleus of an atom as you are to the Earth right now, there's going to be about the same distance between you and the nearest proton as to the moon, and to the nearest electron about the same as the distance to the sun. Different scales, same proportions and ratios. You know, my hand is an expression of Fibonacci just in the same way that spiral galaxy is. And so if there is symmetry in one format, there's going to be symmetry in experience, which we call synchronicity. There's going to be symmetries of form and function. You know, there are different orders of magnetism. And just as I was talking earlier about the compressing of information into symbols via sigils or ritual, the universe is kind of the same thing. So if you learn about magnetism, you also understand symmetry and et cetera, you know. There are correspondences between every system that can be transferred. So when you gain knowledge of one system, you have gained knowledge of all systems. It's just a matter of adjusting the context, you know. So when you learn in this way, you quickly can attain to the level of genius, because this is what genius is. And what you find is that when you train your brain to process on multiple levels at once with, say, the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, your brain will start to do this on its own all the time. So you're no longer looking at a window. You see a window and your brain is like translating it on a whole stack of levels. And that's always happening to some extent, but you know, like you're amplifying those dynamics. So, you know, this is what we have to replace the current morass of bullshit and delusion and disinformation and misinformation and religious superstition and all that kind of stuff. Just needs to back off, man. I've had enough of it. Let me see. Did you guys pop any questions or subjects into the chat? As within, so without. That's facts. I don't see anything. So thank you guys so much for your participation tonight. We are at an average view duration of 13 and 13, which is the number of initiation. So that makes sense. And I thank you all for being here. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe, send me millions of dollars before it's too late. And I'll see you guys tomorrow afternoon.